The space station hung quiet above the silver clouds of Zera. Inside the station, people moved fast, engineers fixing panels, traders shouting deals, guards watching every shadow. Humans were few here, only a handful allowed to work among the great alien empire. And among those humans, Daniel was the most ordinary. He worked as a cleaner, a simple man. He had no rank, no special skills, no power. Every day he pushed his cart, wiped the shining floors, and kept his head low. He knew the rules. Never look too long at the aliens, never speak unless spoken to, and never, ever mention the Empress or her daughter. But everything changed the night the guards came for him. The hookit started with a sound, heavy boots echoing down the metal hall. Daniel froze, his mop dripping water on the floor. A group of tall alien guards, armored in silver and blue, stopped in front of him. Their leader held a glowing crystal tablet. The light from it burned against Daniel's eyes. "Human, Daniel," the leader said. His voice was deep like stone breaking. "By order of the royal crest, you are summoned to the palace." The other workers stopped moving. Silence spread. No one spoke, no one dared to breathe. A human summoned to the palace? Impossible. The Empress hated humans. They were allowed to clean, to fix, to build, but never to touch the royal halls. Daniel's mouth went dry. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. There must be a mistake. I am nobody." The guard's hand shot out, gripping Daniel's arm like iron. "You will come." The journey. The station doors opened and Daniel was dragged into a royal shuttle. Smooth, black walls surrounded him. Alien symbols glowed faintly, like stars floating in the dark. He sat stiff, his heart hammering. The guard said nothing. Through the shuttle window he saw the capital world below, towers of crystal rising into clouds, rivers of golden light flowing between them. The palace itself glowed like fire at the heart of the city. Daniel whispered, to himself, "Why me?" No answer came, only the sound of engines, carrying him closer and closer to a fate he could not understand. Arrival at the palace. The shuttle landed on shining stone steps. The palace gates rose high, carved with faces of past rulers. Giant banners moved in the wind, each marked with the crest of the Empress. Daniel walked under the weight of 100 stairs. Courtiers, soldiers, and servants lined the path. They whispered as he passed. "A human? Here? This is an insult. Why would the Empress allow this?" His legs shook, but he forced himself forward. The guards led him through wide halls where walls sparkled with living light. Statues of alien heroes loomed tall, their eyes cold. At last, the guards stopped before a set of golden doors. One guard pushed them open. "Enter, the princess, the Rior." Hall inside was vast, glowing with silver fires. Hundreds of nobles stood in silence. At the far end, on a raised throne, sat the Empress herself. Tall, dressed in black armor that shone like obsidian. Her eyes burned with sharp gold. But Daniel's eyes were not drawn to her. They were drawn to the figure standing below the throne, a young alien woman, tall but graceful, her eyes bright like the ocean before a storm. She was the princess. The crowd bowed. Daniel stood frozen. His heart thundered. The princess stepped forward. Her voice was clear, soft, yet it carried through the hall. "You," she said, looking straight at him. "Dance with me." The suspense Daniel's breath caught. He thought he misheard. Dance? With the princess? The nobles gasped. Some laughed, sharp and cruel. Others whispered in fear. A human touching the royal daughter? This cannot be allowed. The Empress said nothing. Her golden eyes watched, cold as ice. Daniel's throat was dry. His hands shook. If he refused, he might insult the throne. If he agreed, he could die for daring to touch her. The princess lifted her hand, waiting. The silence grew heavy. Every eye in the hall was on him. Daniel thought of his simple life, the mop, the floors, the quiet corners where no one noticed him. And now, here he stood, before an empire, asked to dance with the most powerful princess in the galaxy. He swallowed hard. His heart said run. His body stayed frozen. The princess's eyes met his. For one strange moment, Daniel saw no judgment there, only curiosity, and maybe loneliness. He stepped forward, slowly. The nobles cried out. The guards tightened their grips on their weapons. The Empress leaned forward on her throne. Daniel raised his hand. The princess smiled, and the dance began. Closing suspense. The music started, low, haunting notes filling the hall. Daniel's steps were simple, clumsy compared to the elegant alien forms, yet the princess laughed, soft and real, as if the weight of the world had lifted for a moment. That laugh echoed through the hall like thunder. The nobles froze. They had not heard her laugh in years. The Empress's hand gripped the throne, her knuckles white. Her golden eyes narrowed, sharp as blades. She whispered to her advisor, her voice like poison. This human is dangerous. The great hall was frozen in silence. The human, Daniel, stood with his hand lifted. The alien princess, tall and radiant, had accepted it. Around them, nobles gasped and whispered. Soldiers' hands hovered over their weapons. No one dared to move without the Empress's command. The music rose again, deep and strange, played by alien instruments that hummed like the heart of a star. And so it began, the first human dance in the palace of the Alien Empire. The hook Daniel's. Steps were unsure. He had no training in alien dance. His feet moved awkwardly, simple movements he remembered from home, small steps, light turns, nothing grand. Against the shining floors, it looked clumsy, out of place. But the princess did not laugh in mockery. She laughed with joy, a warm, gentle sound that echoed through the hall. The nobles stared in shock. They had not seen her smile for years. From her throne, the Empress leaned forward, her golden eyes narrowing. The sound of her daughter's laughter cut her like a blade. The dance Daniel felt sweat on his back. Every step felt like walking on the edge of a knife. The noble's stares burned against his skin. If he tripped, if he insulted her, he might not live to see another hour. Yet the princess guided him. Her hands were steady, her eyes bright. She bent close and whispered so only he could hear, "Do not fear, just move." Her voice calmed him. His shoulders eased. He let the music flow through him. Simple human steps, turn, sway, a soft spin. The princess followed, her movements far more graceful, yet she matched his rhythm. Gasps rose from the crowd. They had never seen their princess bend herself to match another, least of all a human. And still she laughed again. Light, free. The sound spread like fire. It was more dangerous than a weapon. The shadows watching high above, hidden in the balconies, royal advisors exchanged nervous looks. The alien lords muttered, "This is wrong. This is dangerous. He weakens her dignity." No, he awakens her. The Empress heard it all. Her face was calm, but her fingers gripped the arm of her throne until cracks formed in the black stone. To her, this was not a dance. It was rebellion. Daniel's fear inside. Daniel's heart pounded. Each second felt heavier. He could feel the Empress's gaze piercing him like a blade. He could hear the whispers of the nobles circling like vultures. He thought, "What am I doing? I am just a cleaner. I do not belong here. I should stop." But then he looked at the princess. Her eyes shone, alive with light he had never seen before. She was not a distant royal anymore. She was a young woman hidden in loneliness, now smiling because of him. That gave him courage. He took a bolder step, spinning her gently. She followed with ease, her dress flowing like waves. The crowd gasped again. The Empress's rage. The Empress stood at last. Her armor shimmered in the hall's light. The music faltered as silence fell once more. Her voice rang like thunder. Enough. Daniel froze mid-step. The princess stopped too, her hand still holding his. The Empress's golden eyes locked on Daniel. Her words were slow, heavy with power. You dare touch my daughter? You dare bring your weakness into this hall? Human, do you know what punishment waits for such arrogance? The hall shook with fear. No one dared breathe. Daniel bowed his head. I did not mean insult, Great Empress. I only did what was asked. Her eyes narrowed, sharp and burning. And you made her laugh. The last word dripped with venom. A dangerous whisper. The princess stepped forward, her voice steady. Mother, I commanded it. Do not blame him. The hall gasped louder. No one ever spoke against the Empress, not even her daughter. The Empress's face turned like ice. She looked at her child as if seeing a stranger. But she said nothing. Instead, she turned to her advisors and whispered so low only the closest could hear. This human must be tested. If he is a fool, he will break. If he is more, then he must be destroyed. Her golden eyes flicked back to Daniel. And for the first time, he felt not just her anger, but her fear. The escape from the hall. The music ended. The nobles bowed, unsure, afraid. Guards surrounded Daniel but did not strike. The Empress raised her hand. Take him away. He will be watched. The princess's eyes followed Daniel as he was led from the hall. Their gazes locked for a moment, hers filled with silent warning, his filled with confusion and dread. Daniel was dragged through the golden doors, his heart beating like war drums. Closing suspense that night in the shadows of the palace, whispers spread faster than light. Servants murmured in secret halls. The princess laughed. She touched a human. She defied the Empress. And in a dark chamber, alone, the Empress spoke to herself. A prophecy spoke of this. A stranger would break the chains of the throne. Could it be this simple man? Her hand tightened into a fist. If so, I will crush him before the chains break me. The Empress's shadow stretched long across the chamber wall, heavy and cold. And Daniel, unaware of the prophecy, slept in fear, not knowing that his dance had already changed the empire forever. The palace was never truly silent. Even in the deepest hours of night, footsteps echoed, whispers traveled, and secrets walked like shadows. Yet after the dance, the palace felt different. Something invisible had cracked. A laugh, one laugh, had broken through the frozen walls of the empire, and that laugh belonged to the princess. The hooked Daniel lay awake on the hard bed in his guarded chamber. He stared at the ceiling, replaying the scene again and again. The music, the eyes, the Empress's voice full of venom. He turned on his side, his heart heavy. Why did she choose me? Why did she make me dance? He was only a cleaner. Ordinary, nothing more. But now the most powerful woman in the empire wanted him tested or destroyed. The door outside creaked. Boots shifted. Guards were watching even in the night. He could not escape. He could only wait for morning. And judgment. The murmurs elsewhere in the palace, the whispers had already begun. Servants spoke in corners. Courtiers muttered in hallways. Guards exchanged nervous glances. The human made her laugh. She smiled. With him. No one has seen that in years. The words spread like sparks in dry wood. To some it was scandal. To others, it was hope. For so long, the empire had lived under the Empress's cold rule. Fear in every shadow, silence in every hall. But now, maybe change had come. The hidden garden at dawn, Daniel was escorted through narrow corridors to the palace gardens. He expected chains, maybe an execution ground. Instead, he saw tall silver trees, glowing flowers, and streams of crystal water. The guards left him there, silent. He sat on a stone bench, his mind racing. Then footsteps approached. Light. Careful. The princess stepped into the garden. Her dress shimmered like dawn. She looked at him, not as a prisoner, but as something else. Did you sleep? She asked. Softly. Daniel shook his head. How could I? Her eyes lowered. I am sorry. I did not mean to bring you danger. He blinked. Then why? Why me? She smiled faintly, sadness behind it. Because you looked alive. Everyone here wears masks. But you were real. The secret warning. Daniel stood nervous. Your mother. She will not forgive this. The princess's eyes darkened. I know she fears you. She fears what you might become. Daniel laughed bitterly. I am nothing. Just a man with tired hands and a mop. The princess leaned closer, her voice almost a whisper. And yet you made me laugh. Do you know what that means? It means others saw. They felt. My people remember joy. My mother cannot control that. Her hand brushed his arm lightly. Be careful, Daniel. The walls have ears, but remember, you are not alone now. Before he could answer, she was gone, slipping back into the palace like a shadow. The rebel's message later that night, as Daniel returned to his chamber, he noticed something odd. A folded piece of paper slid under his door. Humans rarely saw paper in the palace. He unfolded it. The words were written in rough strokes. The laugh has awakened us. Meet at the lower kitchens, past midnight. Tell no one. Daniel's hands shook. A trap? Or something else? He looked at the guards outside, unmoving, silent. Slowly, he hid the paper under his blanket. The meeting hours later, when the moonlight fell across the halls, Daniel made his move. The guards outside his door had grown still. He waited, then slipped out step by step down the cold corridors. The palace at night was a maze of silence. Statues glared from the walls, torches flickered, and every shadow seemed alive. But Daniel followed the directions, heart pounding. At last, he reached the lower kitchens. The smell of spices lingered. Empty pots sat cold. Then a figure stepped from the dark. A young alien servant, eyes sharp but kind. You are him, she whispered. The human who danced. Daniel hesitated. And who are you? She smiled faintly. A friend. And not only me. From the shadows, others appeared. Kitchen workers, servants, even a young guard. Their faces were tired, but hopeful. The whisper of rebellion. The servant spoke again. For years the Empress ruled with fear. No joy, no freedom. We were silent. But yesterday we saw something no one expected. The princess laughed. The human made her laugh. That means the chain can break. Daniel stepped back. I do not understand. I am not a leader. I do not want war. The young guard shook his head. Not war. Hope. You gave us that without knowing. Another servant whispered. Already people talk in the streets. They say if one human can change the princess, maybe others can change the empire. You are more than you think. Daniel's stomach tightened. He wanted to protest, to shout, I am nothing. But deep inside, he knew something had shifted. The Empress in the dark far above, in her private chamber. The Empress looked out over the glowing city. She did not need spies to tell her. She could feel it in the air. Her power, once absolute, now trembling. She clenched her hands. It begins. The prophecy moves. Her voice was cold, sharp as a blade. Then let it be tested. If the human is strong, he will break under pressure. If not, he will die slowly. Her golden eyes glowed in the darkness. Either way, I will not let chains fall from my throne. Closing suspense, Daniel returned to his chamber with heavy steps, the whispers of the rebels still in his ears. Hope, change, dangerous words in a palace built on fear. He sat on the edge of his bed staring at his hands. They were simple hands, scarred from work, rough from cleaning floors. Hands that had no power. And yet, those same hands had touched a princess, had made her laugh, had sparked whispers of rebellion. In the shadows outside his door, unseen eyes glowed. The Empress's spies watched. Daniel did not know it yet, but his every step would now decide the fate of an empire. The royal palace towered over the capital like a mountain of black crystal. At night, its walls glowed faintly with golden veins of power, as if the building itself breathed. Inside, the Empress stood alone in her chamber far above her sleeping city. She was not a woman easily shaken. For decades, she had ruled with a cold hand, breaking every rival, silencing every whisper. Her throne was built on obedience and fear, and yet tonight she trembled. The hook. The Empress stared into a mirror framed with silver fire. Her golden eyes burned back at her, but in them she saw something she hated. Doubt. The laugh of her daughter still echoed in her ears. That laugh had been dead for years, buried beneath duty and silence. But one human, a low-born cleaner, had pulled it out with nothing more than clumsy steps. The Empress closed her eyes. She remembered the old words of prophecy. One not of, "Our blood shall awaken the royal heart, and with that heart the empire shall change." Her hands clenched the edge of the mirror. No, she would not let a prophecy rule her fate. She had destroyed greater threats before. She would destroy this one too. The cold council at dawn, she called her advisors. The Grand Council gathered in the obsidian chamber, each lord and general bowing low. "The human has become a symbol," the Empress said, her voice sharp. "I will not allow symbols." A noble hissed. "Yes, my Empress." The whispers spread. Even the markets speak of him. Another whispered. "The people say, if he can touch the princess's heart, maybe he can touch theirs." The Empress's eyes flashed. "Enough. I want silence. I want fear again." Her generals bowed. One asked carefully, "Shall we remove him quietly?" The Empress shook her head. "No. Quiet death gives birth to legend. I will break him in sight of all. I will test his spirit until it shatters. When they see him crawl, when they see him beg, they will forget hope." The chamber grew colder. None dared speak. The princess's plea later that day. The princess stood before her mother in the throne hall. She bowed low, but her voice was steady. "Mother, do not harm him. He is innocent." The Empress's eyes narrowed. "Innocent? He has turned you against me. He has turned the people's eyes to you instead of their throne." The princess raised her head, courage flashing in her eyes. "He only danced. You fear him because I laughed." The Empress's jaw tightened. For a moment, silence filled the hall. Then she spoke, cold and final. "You will remain silent. Speak again, and I will remind you who holds the crown." The princess's lips trembled, but she said no more. She bowed again, her fists clenched at her sides. The Empress watched, her go. And though she did not show it, her heart twisted. Once, long ago, she too had laughed. Once, she too had been free. Daniel under watch meanwhile. Daniel felt the weight of eyes on him everywhere. Guards followed his every step. Servants who had smiled at him before now turned away, fearful of spies. Even in the garden, where the princess once spoke with him, shadows seemed to move like hunters. Daniel muttered to himself, "I should have stayed a cleaner. At least floors don't try to kill you." But deep inside, he knew it was too late. The dance had changed everything. The first test. That evening, soldiers came. They dragged Daniel to a chamber of black stone. At its center was a glowing circle, marked with alien runes. The Empress's voice thundered from above. "You will step into the circle. It will test your mind. If you break, you will be discarded. If you survive, the Empire will see what you truly are." Daniel's stomach twisted. He wanted to run. But the guards pushed him forward. The moment his feet touched the circle, pain shot through his skull. Voices screamed inside his head. Visions of fire, war, and death flooded his mind. His body shook. His knees nearly buckled. He thought of giving up. What am I to them? Just a joke. Just a pawn. But then he remembered the princess's smile. The rebels whispered hope. The look in the Empress's eyes, not only rage but fear. He clenched his teeth. I will not break. The circle flared with light, then went dark. Daniel collapsed to the ground, gasping but alive. The nobles who watched whispered in shock. Few had ever survived the circle. The Empress's fear grows from her throne above. The Empress gripped the railing. She had expected the human to fall, to scream, to beg. Instead, he had endured. Her advisors bowed, uncertain. Perhaps he is stronger than we thought. The Empress's eyes burned. Stronger, yes. That is why he must be broken further. But, as she turned away, a shadow passed over her heart. Fear. Real fear. Because the prophecy's words whispered again in her mind. One knot of our blood shall awaken the royal heart, and with that heart, the empire shall change. Closing suspense. That night, Daniel lay on the cold floor of his chamber, body trembling from pain. He had survived, but for how long? The princess pressed her hand against the door, whispering from the other side. Hold on, Daniel. Do not give up. He closed his eyes, hearing her voice, and held on to it like fire in the dark. Far above, the Empress stood on her balcony, watching the endless city lights. Her people whispered in secret corners. Her daughter defied her. A human had lived through the trial. For the first time in her reign, the Empress felt the ground shift beneath her throne, and she knew this was only the beginning. The nights in the palace grew colder. Daniel's chamber, once only watched, now felt like a cage. Guards stood outside his door, their eyes hard, their weapons ready. He had survived the Empress's first test, but that only made things worse. Survival made him dangerous. Survival made him unforgettable, and the Empress did not forgive what she could not control. The hook Daniel sat on the stone floor, staring at his rough hands. He could still feel the burning circle inside his head, the screams, the visions. Yet somehow, he was alive. But he asked himself again and again, why? Why stay? Why not run at the first chance? The answer came with a face, the princess. Her eyes when she smiled, her voice when she whispered through the door. Do not give up. He should run. He should escape before the Empress crushed him. But his heart pulled him toward her, even if that path led only to death. The princess's secret. The next morning, the princess came to the garden again. She walked quickly, her cloak pulled tight, her eyes scanning for spies. Daniel stood as she approached. His body was weak, but his spirit still burned. You should not be here, he said softly. And yet I am, she replied, her voice trembling with urgency. Mother plans more trials. She will push you until you break, or until you no longer exist. Daniel looked at her, exhausted. Then maybe I should leave. Maybe I should find a way out before it's too late. Her eyes filled with sudden fear. If you go, they will call you coward. Hope will die with you. The whispers will vanish. He shook his head. I never asked to be hope. I never asked to be anything. She stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. But you are. To me. To them. Her words struck him harder than any trial. For a moment, the world fell silent, midnight in the garden. That night Daniel could not sleep. The guards shifted outside, the walls pressed in. Finally he moved. He whispered to the guards that the princess had summoned him. They hesitated but did not stop him. Her name still carried weight. He slipped into the garden again. The moonlight fell across silver leaves, and there, waiting, was the princess. She stood barefoot in the grass, her cloak gone, her face open and unguarded. You came, she whispered. Daniel nodded. His voice was rough. I don't know why. Maybe I'm a fool. She smiled sadly. Then we are both fools. They stood together, under the glowing trees. And slowly Daniel raised his hand again, not for duty, not for command, But because he wanted to, the princess placed her hand in his, and once again they danced. The Empress's eyes, but the garden was not empty. From the shadows, hidden guards watched, and in a tower high above, the Empress herself gazed through a window, her golden eyes burning. She saw her daughter's smile, her gentle laugh, the way she leaned close to the human. It was not just rebellion, it was something far worse. Affection. Love. The Empress's heart clenched with fury. She struck her fist against the window frame, shattering the glass. This ends tonight. The storm breaks the next day. The throne hall was filled with nobles, soldiers, and servants. Daniel was dragged forward in chains. His body ached, but his spirit held steady. The Empress rose from her throne, her voice echoing like thunder. This human thinks himself worthy. He corrupts my daughter. He corrupts my people. Today his weakness ends. The nobles bowed, fearful. The guards tightened their grip on their weapons, but the princess stepped forward. Her voice rang out across the hall. "No!" The crowd gasped. No one defied the Empress so openly. The princess's eyes blazed. "He is no threat. He gave me laughter. He gave me freedom. If you destroy him, you destroy me as well." The hall shook with silence. Every noble, every servant, every soldier felt the weight of her words. Daniel's choice. Daniel's heart pounded. He looked at the Empress, then at the princess. His mind screamed at him to stay silent. But his heart would not let him. He raised his head. His voice, though rough, carried through the hall. "I never came here to fight your throne. I never wanted to be your enemy. But if survival means betraying her, then I choose her, even if it kills me." The nobles gasped again. The guards stiffened. The Empress's face turned to stone. Her golden eyes blazed with fury, closing suspense. The Empress lifted her hand. Soldiers surrounded Daniel, weapons drawn. The hall trembled with tension. The princess cried out, rushing forward. "Mother, stop!" But the Empress's voice was like fire. This human lives only long enough to face the trial of fire, and when he burns, all hope burns with him. The soldiers dragged Daniel away. The princess screamed, struggling against her mother's guards, and above it all, the Empress stood like a shadow carved from ice. Yet deep inside, she felt the one thing she hated most. Fear. Fear of her daughter's love. Fear of a prophecy she could no longer control. The royal arena had not been used in years. Once, it was a place of glory where warriors proved their strength. Now it was a graveyard of fire and ash, feared by all who entered. On this night, the arena blazed once again. Thousands filled the stands. Nobles in jeweled robes, soldiers in silver armor, common people in rough clothes. They had come to see one thing: a human's end. At the center of it all stood Daniel in chains. The hook, the ground beneath him glowed with cracks of molten fire. The air smelled of smoke and blood. High above, the Empress sat on a black throne built into the arena wall. Her golden eyes burned like twin suns. She raised her hand, and silence fell. "Tonight," she declared, her voice echoing across the stone, "this human faces the trial of fire. If he survives, the Empire will see his true nature. If he fails, his ashes will remind all who dare to dream. Hope is death." The crowd trembled. Daniel looked up, his throat dry. He wanted to shout, to curse, to beg, but instead he whispered to himself, "I will not break." The princess's cry. From the side, behind guarded chains of her own, the princess cried out, "Mother, stop this madness, he is innocent." The Empress's gaze snapped toward her daughter, cold, merciless. "You will watch, you will learn, and you will forget him." The princess's eyes filled with tears, but she stood tall. "I will never forget." The words rippled through the crowd like lightning. Whispers spread. Some looked at Daniel with pity. others with awe, and the Empress's fury grew sharper. The first flames, the trial began. The floor shifted, splitting into rings of fire. Heat roared upward, forcing Daniel to stumble back. From hidden gates, beasts emerged, creatures made of living flame, their bodies burning, their eyes glowing like coals. The crowd gasped. Few had ever seen such monsters outside of legend. Daniel's heart hammered. He had no weapon, no armor, only his bare hands and his will to live. The first beast lunged. He rolled aside, feeling the fire scorch his skin. Pain tore through him, but he forced himself up. The second beast came. He grabbed a broken spear lying on the ground from an old fight. With shaking arms, he drove it into the creature's burning chest. The fire flared, then the beast crumbled to ash. The crowd roared. The Empress watches from her throne. The Empress leaned forward. She had wanted him to burn quickly, to fall like any weak fool. But the human fought. He stumbled, he bled, but he did not give in. Her jaw tightened. Why does he not break? Each time a beast came, Daniel found a way, dodging, striking, surviving. He was no warrior, but his stubborn will refused to die. The people began to shout, louder and louder. Not in fear, but in hope. The breaking point at last, the gates opened one final time. The ground shook. The largest beast stepped forward. A towering monster of flame and stone, its roar shaking the arena walls. Daniel's body was broken, his clothes burned, his hands bleeding. He could barely stand. The monster charged. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. He thought of his home, of quiet nights with stars, of a mop in his hands, of a simple life he would never return to. Then he thought of her, the princess, her smile, her laugh. He opened his eyes, and he ran, the impossible victory. The crowd screamed as the monster swung its burning claws. Daniel leapt aside, the heat searing his arm. He rolled, grabbed a shard of broken stone, and drove it into the beast's leg. The monster howled. Daniel climbed its burning body, his skin blistering, his lungs choking on smoke. With one final cry, he struck the shard deep into the creature's blazing skull. The beast roared once, then collapsed into fire and ash. Silence fell. Daniel stood swaying, in the smoke, his chest heaving, his body shaking. But he was alive, and the people erupted in thunderous cheers. The Empress's fury. The Empress rose from her throne, her armor gleaming like night. Her face was calm, but her eyes blazed with fury. The crowd's voices had changed. They were not afraid anymore. They were chanting, "Human, human, human." The Empress's fists clenched. The prophecy's words stabbed her mind again. One knot of our blood shall awaken the royal heart, and with that heart, the empire shall change. She shouted above the crowd, "This is no victory. This is a trick. He is nothing." But even her voice could not drown the people's cry. Closing suspense. Daniel fell to his knees, exhausted. The guards moved forward, but they hesitated. Even some of them looked at him with something new in their eyes. Respect. The princess pulled against her chains, her voice breaking. "Daniel." He looked at her, barely able to lift his head. But he smiled, faint and real. High above, the Empress watched, her fear growing heavier than her crown. For the first time in her reign, she saw her people's hearts slipping from her hands, and, she whispered to herself, cold and deadly, "If fire cannot kill him, then I will." The arena still smelled of ash and smoke. Daniel knelt in the center, his body burned, his strength nearly gone. Around him the crowd roared, their voices, shaking the night, "Human, human, human." Never before had the Empire's people shouted for one knot of their blood. Never before had they looked to a foreigner for hope, and high above the Empress stood frozen. The hook her golden eyes swept across the crowd. For years, their faces had been silent, bowed, obedient. Now they glowed with fire, hope, defiance, hunger for change, all because of him. The Empress's chest tightened, Rage filled her like storm winds. She wanted to scream, to strike, to crush the man who had stolen her people's hearts. But beneath the rage was fear. Fear of prophecy. Fear of her throne breaking. Fear of her daughter's love for this human. And the Empress did not like fear. The Empress's choice. She raised her hand. The arena fell silent. Guards tensed, waiting for her command. Her voice rang sharp and cold. This human lives only because I allow it. But know this, he is no hero. He is a danger. And dangers must be controlled. The people shifted uneasily. Some lowered their eyes, but others did not. The whispers were already too strong to die. Daniel, still on his knees, lifted his head. His voice was hoarse but steady. You can chain me. You can kill me. But you cannot take back what has already begun. They saw. They felt. You cannot silence that. The crowd stirred again. The Empress's eyes narrowed. Bold fool. Brave fool. The princess speaks. The princess broke free of the guards holding her. She rushed forward, her voice louder than it had ever been. He is right, she cried. I laughed because of him, I felt alive because of him, and you cannot take that from me. The hall erupted with gasps. Nobles covered their mouths. Soldiers shifted nervously. No one had ever spoken to the Empress like this, not even her own daughter. The Empress turned slowly toward her child. Her face was calm, but her heart cracked. She saw her daughter not as a weak princess, but as a woman standing tall against her. It was the prophecy again, breathing before her eyes. The breaking moment. The Empress could end it. One command, one strike, and the human would burn. Her daughter could be silenced. Fear would rule again. But as she looked at Daniel, broken yet unyielding, and at her daughter, strong with love, she felt something she had buried long ago. Memory. A memory of her own youth. Of when she had laughed, danced, loved. Before the crown had turned her heart to stone. Her hand trembled. For the first time in decades, the Empress doubted her own power. The empire holds its breath. The arena was silent now, every soul waiting, thousands of eyes locked on the throne. Would the Empress kill? Would she show mercy? Would she prove herself unbreakable, or reveal her fear? The Empress lowered her hand slowly. Her voice came out quiet, almost human. The human stays. The crowd gasped. Then, like thunder breaking, cheers erupted. People shouted, cried, clapped their hands against the stone. The empire itself seemed to shake with the sound. Daniel blinked, stunned, the princess's eyes filled with tears of relief. And the Empress? She stood tall. But inside, her world had shifted. A new beginning. That night, Daniel was taken back to the palace, but not as a prisoner. Guards no longer held their weapons ready, against him. Some even nodded in respect. The princess walked beside him, her hand brushing his. She whispered, "You did it, you changed her." Daniel shook his head, still in disbelief. No, she changed herself. But deep inside he knew the truth. A single dance, a single laugh, had cracked the coldest heart in the empire. The Empress. Alone in her chamber, the Empress stood before the broken mirror. Her reflection stared back, golden eyes softer than before. She whispered to herself, "I should have killed him. I should have crushed him." Yet her hand trembled. For the first time, she allowed the tremble to remain. The prophecy's words echoed again. One knot of our blood shall awaken the royal heart, and with that heart the empire shall change. She touched her chest, where her heart beat strong and strange. And she knew it was already too late. The change had begun. Closing suspense. The empire celebrated in hidden streets, candles glowing in windows, voices singing softly. A human had lived. The princess had defied her mother. The Empress had spared him. But in the shadows, not all were pleased. Old enemies of the throne whispered darker plans. Rebels spoke of rising. And beyond the stars, other empires listened carefully. If one dance can shake her throne, a rival ruler muttered, what will happen when humans rise across the galaxy? Far above it all, Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling of his chamber. He had no crown, no army, no power, and yet he had changed an empress. The future was no longer hers alone. It belonged to both of them, human and alien, hand in hand, and the galaxy would never be the same.